Well, welcome to another episode of You-niversal Upgrades. And today we'll be talking about diets. Now, I know a lot of times we think of diets mainly as a mean to lose weight. But I guess that makes sense for where we are today, where weight seems to be a challenge for a lot of people. But I think weight is just a symptom of something that is underlying, that is causing the problem or the challenge. So I think today we're going to look at diets a little bit differently. And so this will be a conversation with my daughter Yael, and she has prepared a list of common diets that we're going to dive into today. So maybe as we get started, Yael, you can share with us what do you think how we maybe can look at diet a little bit differently so we get to the root and instead of just looking at the symptom of weight gain.
Yeah, so I think that, diets, like you said, are really associated with like purely just weight loss, but looking more into like what makes up a lot of these different diets, and then what the purpose of the diets are can really give us an insight into what kind of like deeper health impact these diets may be having. And so let me share my screen. Yeah, so first, to understand a little bit more about just the basics of diets and nutrition, it's good to understand what makes up our food and what makes up these different diets ultimately. And so for the basic components of food, we have macronutrients and micronutrients. And macronutrients include the three groups: the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So these are just the different compounds that make up all different kinds of foods. All foods are like a mix of these things. And so carbohydrates, or foods that are particularly high in carbohydrates, would include things like bread, or like sugary things like baked goods or fruit. And then proteins would be like meats, like beef, chicken, fish, even like milk, and say like dairy products like cheese have some protein, but they will also have fats, and fats are the other group. So fats would be like our oils, butter, or even foods high in fats like nuts, avocados would be higher in fats. And so, these are like the macronutrients that make up our food. And the micronutrients break down into vitamins and minerals. And so, these are just even on a smaller level, and these are also essential for all of our bodily health processes.
Yeah, so I guess you can say that maybe diets are a way to design the food that we take that has a different combination of these things for different purposes, right? So it's important to understand the makeup of these nutrients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because some diets use these to categorize, or use specific foods or specific nutrients, amounts of nutrients to categorize, or to like that's how diets are categorized. But like in some diets will emphasize some more micronutrients or just micronutrients in general. So it's good to know like the makeup of these foods, like what these diets are trying to target.
Yeah. So instead of thinking of just calories, it seems like this gives us a more complete picture of how we can understand the purpose behind. So what are some of the purposes you feel that we are oftentimes missing and just only thinking about calories and weight loss?
So like we've been saying, like the purpose of the diet matters a lot. And so most people think of weight loss for dieting. But yeah, there's also a lot of other reasons like managing different chronic diseases or trying to keep in check, say, an autoimmune condition, or maybe trying to regain insulin sensitivity for type 2 diabetes, or, some people will do specific diets or even like fasting regimens for longevity. And so there's a lot of reasons why people may be going on a specific diet. And it's really not just for like weight loss.
Yeah, that's definitely true in my personal coaching. Somebody just shared with me their results recently, where she's been on thyroid medication for 20-something years, and she's been on hypertension, blood pressure medication for like at least 5 years, and now she's down to maybe just less than a quarter of the doses now because everything is back to normal. And she said, well, weight loss is actually not my main goal. I just want to get off medication. But, she lost 20 kg. So in the process, so it's pretty significant. Yeah, it's pretty significant. Yeah, so as a nutrition major, studying dietetics, you have, you learn about various common popular forms of diets. So maybe we can go through some of them. You can tell us what they are for and what kind of foods they are prescribing.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with, I guess that's the DASH diet. It's one of the most, I think, recommended in the, I guess, in the nutrition world.
Yeah. So a lot of doctors will recommend this, and then like a lot of dietitians will kind of like reinforce it. But this one is one of the major diets we learn about. And so DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And so it's in the name, it's to address hypertension. And so this is a low salt or low sodium diet. So that's kind of their emphasis. So like a couple primary components of this is low sodium and then low red meat. And this is supposed to be able to address hypertension and supposed to be able to lower, blood pressure and lower LDL cholesterol. So so it would just be reducing sodium. And this is kind of, based off of that, the thought that, like saturated fats would increase your cholesterol. So that's the purpose of like lowering the saturated fat. And so that's why they emphasize, so you can see like lean meats and not so much fats.
It seems like there's also a high emphasis on grains. 6 to 8 servings a day, that's actually quite a bit.
Yeah, it is quite a bit. This is definitely more traditional nutrition. And so it's one of the common thoughts in, I guess, like mainstream nutrition, that like, you need grain, or you need a certain amount of grain, and that, like you want the fiber. And a lot of these grains are fortified, and that's also, advertised as like very healthy. And and so I think a lot of this DASH and DASH these more like traditional, like popular dietary like approaches is based off of like the large amount of epidemiology in nutrition. And so this is like I guess like observational research. And so there's a lot of studies that will point to, say, like, grains being more healthy, or more servings of grains being healthy, and then less servings of red meat being healthier, in terms of like correlation to mortality. So there's a lot of epidemiology that points to that. And so it's that kind of stuff that's the basis of like these more like, I guess, higher grain and low red meat and these kinds of diets.
Well, at least I think there's it's pointing to less sugar or added sugar at least, even though just the grains are basically sugar just in a longer chain. So they still break down. But it is, the added sugar is probably the most problematic. Yeah. Okay. And then, so this is one of the top ones. What's another top recommended diets?
Yeah, so another really popular one is the Mediterranean diet. And so this diet is similar in that it emphasizes like reducing red meats and sugar and sweets. And then I guess most of the protein would be, like fish or seafood. And then, some, I guess, like not red meats. So like chicken, poultry, eggs, and then so there still are some saturated fats in like cheese and yogurt, but yeah, like they'll still try to reduce red meats, and then like on a basis of fruits, vegetables, and then this one will also have like grains and stuff. But yeah, so it's kind of somewhat similar, but yeah.
And it seems to have other components as well, not just food. So it appears to be a more holistic approach.
Yeah. And so this is kind of the cool thing about, I guess, the Mediterranean diet, or kind of like the thought behind it, or that lifestyle pattern, and that you can see at the basis it says, like physically active and then enjoy meals with others. And so this is kind of like that community aspect as well. And so a lot of people, when looking at the Mediterranean diet or just other diet patterns of, say, like, in the 7-country study, I think, Ansel Keys looked at, or like the blue zones, looking at different blue zones where people have like abnormally high or long lifespans. People look at their diet, but a lot of other people, like looking at that research, will say, well, actually, like, the diet is one thing, but lifestyle is another thing. And so, like, they'll point to, say, being physically active being really good for your health, or community. And so I think this is cool how this pyramid, emphasizes, or like also includes that community aspect to it.
Yeah. And in fact, it's interesting that even though it's, I guess in general, it's still recommending lower fat, but you see the olive oil is on a lower rung of the pyramid. So I think it's also trying to distinguish that there are maybe differences in fats, the quality of fats, and what it does to our body.
Yeah. So I think the Mediterranean diet, I think it's a little bit more like categorized by these types of food. Like the DASH diet is still very much in line with like the, I think like the RDA, the official dietary guidelines. And within those guidelines, there are ranges and like amounts, like upper limits, lower limits for micronutrients, and then just like the like macronutrient ranges as well. For the Mediterranean diet, you could still definitely fit that into the standard like American dietary guideline ranges. But I think the Mediterranean diet is broader. Like people will use it different ways, so they'll more freely change up the macros or like of the Mediterranean diet. So you could also do this like a keto Mediterranean diet. So I guess, like you said, you could add more fat into it, and do like that kind of like modification. But yeah, it depends on how you want to use it.
Yeah, I think it depends on where they look in terms of that whole region, in Italy, in Europe. The makeup of the foods they eat is will be quite different. Some people maybe have a lot more cheese. I remember when we were at Netherlands and Belgium, and we were just loading up on cheese because there was so many good varieties. So okay. And now another popular one that's especially in recent years, it's the vegetarian or vegan. And so maybe you can take us through that, because I think this is quite different from the other ones now. not so much focusing on a certain type of nutrients or macronutrients.
Yeah. So the vegetarian diet, you could say, it's categorized by like exclusions or food exclusions. So it would be excluding meat in this case. I think for all three of these diet, like the DASH, Mediterranean, and vegetarian, there's kind of like an emphasis, like a lot of people go on these diets because they want to reduce risk for cardiovascular disease. And this is kind of like the thought of, reducing saturated fat, reducing cholesterol. But yeah, this vegetarian is like excluding meat. And then there's different types of vegetarian diets, like a bunch of them. There's like vegan, which is, I guess, the most restrictive one, where you won't eat any meat or any meat animal products. And so, like no eggs or milk or honey for some vegans. And then, there's like less restrictive ones like pescatarian, which would be allowing fish. And then like ovo-lacto vegetarian, which would be allowing the eggs, like chicken eggs and stuff, and milk or like dairy products. So it's different kinds of vegetarian diets, but a lot of reasons for these different vegetarian diets too. Like I said, a huge one that a lot of people talk about, and a lot of, like, really popular, and like a lot of recent documentaries. So like people do it for the like cardiovascular disease risk, or to reduce like the cholesterol. But yeah, some people also do it for ethical reasons, just because they don't want to like kill animals to eat, or for environmental reasons. So.
Yeah, so the assumption there behind, let's say, eating a vegetarian diet for cardiovascular reasons is still, I guess, fat, animal fat. That is the thinking is that is still the problem. And in terms of ethical reasons, it's the killing of animals, or assuming that we're not eating the animals directly, so we're creating less harm. And the environmental reasons is more thinking that maybe animal husbandry creates more environmental impact, right?
Yeah, that's basically the thinking behind it. But yeah. So it's a lot of different reasons why somebody might go on a vegetarian diet. So it is really, really broad.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I think that's a good overview. And then you also have other, maybe more, I think, symptoms or health challenge directed diets as well. So maybe you can take us through some of that.
Yeah. So for one, elimination diets. So elimination diets are kind of like categorized by like specific foods. So the basic pattern of an elimination diet would be to get rid of foods that you may be sensitive to, or foods that are a little like irritating on your digestion. And then like you go through a period of maybe like 2 to 3 weeks or so of getting rid of these foods. And then you reintroduce each food just one at a time, so you can account for all the variables. And then you take like maybe 2 to 3 days to introduce that food back while looking for symptoms, like maybe like rashes or like skin irritation, joint pain, headaches, or fatigue, just whatever symptoms that you may have been having before, or just symptoms of like inflammation or irritation, or like like digestive issues as well. And so that's the basic structure. So these diets can take quite a lot of time, but so like it's basically eliminating things that you might be irritated to, or that might be irritating to your digestion or your system. And so some things that might be common to eliminate for these diets would be like the big 8 allergens, like milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soybean. And in addition to that, some people, like quite a lot of people, also find it helpful to eliminate corn, citrus fruits, and nightshade vegetables. So these are kind of like more common foods that could be, like causing some like inflammation, or just like that people don't tolerate very well. But yeah, there's different types of elimination diets targeted for different things. The low FODMAP diet is like pretty popular for IBS, like irritable bowel syndrome in particular. And so this one will just get rid of kind of like, okay, so like the FODMAP stands for fermentable oligo mono and monosaccharides and polyols. And so eliminating these, it's a lot of kind of like the fibrous foods that would feed, like gut bacteria. So like definitely not like a long-term thing, but that's the whole pattern of an elimination diet. You do it for a period of time, and then you add back in the foods when it's kind of like when your body has a chance to, like heal a little bit, or like adding back the foods to see like which ones are like the like stronger offenders. Yeah. And so there's also the GAPS diet. This is the gut and psychology syndrome diet. And this one kind of really focuses on that. It's like targeting that connection between like your gut and your brain. And so a lot of people do this for like issues like that people think of as being in the brain, like ADD, depression, autism, but also like whole body issues or like gut issues like leaky gut, IBS, or like autoimmune conditions. And yeah, so this one is actually a lot more intensive. It reduces a lot more foods, and you really can't eat that much for the first like pretty long period of time. But then same thing, you slowly add more back. But yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like these diets are trying to get to more of a root cause of a lot of things, and believing that that food and the things that are associated with food are triggers, and it's not necessary that these foods are bad. It's just that at the current state, your body is not able to process it appropriately. I guess like the low FODMAP, I think a lot of people do it because they have the bacteria overgrowth in the small intestine, and so they need to reduce basically food for these bacteria for a short period of time so that they will depopulate, right? So, but you don't want to remove that forever. Or GAPS diet. Sometimes these individuals with neurological related symptoms have imbalances in the microbiome as well. So, and we have, in fact, the intestinal tract sends lots of information back to our brain through the vagus nerve, and so the health of our digestive tract, it's definitely directly connected to the health of our brain, right? So I think seems like that's the theory behind it.
Yeah, that's a pretty key thing for GAPS, and I think even for like most elimination diets, because you kind of watch the gut as one of like the first like symptoms to see what foods you're sensitive to, and you can definitely think about this in terms of inflammation. So like I guess you can think of it, your gut is kind of like the first line of defense. And so when you start to have different gut issues or like digestive issues, that's kind of a warning sign. And then, it can get progressively worse. And like with IBS, even with like Crohn's disease and stuff, a lot of these things are issues of inflammation. And, I guess the elimination diets are largely centered around reducing those offenders or those foods that you might be more sensitive to. And, like I said, it's definitely not supposed to be a permanent thing. You want to be able to reduce that or reduce the, I guess, the source of inflammation, and then let your, gut lining restore and, heal a little bit before, you can add the foods back. And oftentimes people be able to tolerate the foods that they weren't able to tolerate before. But yeah, this is largely centered around inflammation. And even with that, what you're talking about, that connection to the brain, we see a lot of these conditions like depression or like even autism. Like, one thing that you see with these is like inflammation in the brain. And, it's like we're learning more and more recently, like in the past decade or so, how closely linked the gut and the brain are. And, how the gut is like nicknamed the second brain, things like that. And so it's like, this is kind of like the basis for these diets. And that's why, there's like the GAPS diet is an elimination diet that, is trying to target disorders that, we think are in the brain.
Yeah, that's definitely true. A lot of the clients that come to me for neurofeedback, EEG brain training, especially with ADHD, autistic tendencies, it's like 100% of them have digestive issues, or even depression. Yeah, they all have some kind of digestion issues, constipation, diarrhea, bloating. It's a very common occurrence. So I think, there's definitely a very strong connection there. Yeah, and then now maybe you can kind of take us through some of the recent, I guess, popular diets that's more, I guess some would consider fringe, but others find it extremely helpful. So maybe you can take us through some of those right now.
Yeah. So for one, the Paleo Diet was pretty popular. And the Paleo Diet is kind of like more of a primal approach. And so it's categorized by like food, I guess like food groups. So it excludes like food groups like grains, and then like more processed foods like refined sugar, refined flour, like industrial seed oils. And so the whole basis of this is to try to get more like natural foods, like more whole foods in amounts that you would see in nature as well. And so, so it's like just trying to be more natural. And so that's the whole thinking behind it. It's more like ancestral kind of thing.
Yeah, so it seems like they're assuming that we don't have a lot of the modern food practices, including even these large monocrop farms, right? Because that's also in a way a newer food technology. So we're eating food that is more just what you can find naturally. It's just sprouts out of the ground or just in animals that are in nature.
Yeah. So this could also be kind of like an elimination diet as well, because it excludes like like soy and like corn, grains, like these monocrops. And a lot of people find that are more sensitive to these like largely like these monocrops. And so like in a lot of elimination diets, those are the foods that people will eliminate as well. And so, you can also kind of think of it as an elimination diet as well, but yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea behind this is that we are trying to eat something that is more evolutionarily consistent with our physiology, right? So we're not eating all this food that is engineered, that is mass-produced, highly processed. We want to eat foods that aligns with how human beings have been eating for tens of thousands or even maybe hundreds of thousands of years. Right?
Yeah, and like some of the things that people will say and like argue to promote this diet would be like, eliminating these foods like these monocrops would be also, eliminating, say, like GMO foods, but also like the herbicides and pesticides that come in, like, that are just a part of the production of these foods. And then maybe you could, talk about like looking at the types of oils, like the industrial seed oils. Maybe there's a lot of oxidation and stuff that happens in the process of extracting these oils, and just by the nature of these oils, they're less stable and more prone to oxidation. And so, yeah, that's kind of more of like a lower level, like analysis of like on a molecular level, like what's in these foods. But yeah, these are the foods that are kind of like eliminated in the paleo diet.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of people find this helpful because just the processing of foods denatures the nutrients, destroys the nutrients. So we're eating a lot of calories maybe, but not so much the nutrients, or the nutrients in the form that our body do not recognize or cannot utilize.
Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe you can move on to the next one that is very popular, as you see it on internet all the time. And in fact, I've been on some kind of low carb keto or cyclic keto for more than 5 years now, I think. So you can talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. So low carb keto, it's characterized by, well, it's like the macronutrient ratio. So low carb is one thing, but keto is like a very low carb diet. So usually, if you're looking at the macronutrient ratios, you want to get about 5 to 10% of your calories from carbohydrates, and then 20 to 25 from protein, and 70 to 80 from fat. So you're getting most of your calories from fat. And yeah, so that's kind of how it's categorized. So naturally, if you're only getting 5 to 10% of your calories from carbohydrates, you can't eat a lot of like bread or pasta or sugary foods, baked goods, and or like very starchy like roots or tubers, potatoes, or sweet potato, taro, things like that. Yeah. And so I guess a lot of people would go on the keto diet for, say, for insulin sensitivity or like overall metabolic health, because one of the things like some people are using for like what people are using the keto diet for is type 2 diabetes in some clinics now. And so that's the whole insulin sensitivity thing or metabolic health thing. Because in reducing your carb intake, you're really just eliminating all of the, all of the sugars, all of the glucose. And so the insulin isn't being, like constantly like stimulated or required when you're eating your meals, because you're having a more like higher fat or like more protein in your diet. And so people see that, this actually helps a lot of people regain insulin sensitivity. And so a lot of people are able to reduce or even come off of their diabetes medication. And so this is for type 2, where, like diabetes develops over time, not type 1. I don't know so much about like keto for type 1, but for type 2, it's definitely being used.
Yeah, there's this company called Virta Health. In fact, that's what they do. They focus on using dietary approach to reverse type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. And their success rate is very high, something like 80-something%, which is amazing, right? Because you can get people off insulin and medication just through diet. But I think what most people think of the ketogenic diet, it's basically what you present here. It's very low carbohydrate and moderate protein and high fat. But I think there's definitely a lot of nuance to this because ultimately it's really not just about macronutrient ratios, but it's more about whether your body can efficiently create ketones and utilize ketones and fatty acids or free fatty acids for energy, and it can switch back and forth between fat burning and carb burning. Yeah, because I know for myself, I don't need to eat so few carbs, and I can still be in a ketogenic state or in ketosis. Sometimes I will be eating few slices of sourdough bread, and next day I'm still in ketosis. So it depends on how much you exercise, right? As well. Yeah. So it's definitely more nuanced as well, as is with I think all the other dietary approaches as well.
Yeah. Keto in particular can be a little bit complicated because people have ideas about like, oh, is this food keto? And it's like it doesn't quite work like that. It depends on how much carb-containing foods you ate earlier in the day and what your metabolic state is. Because, some people can eat more carbs than others and still stay in ketosis. So it's that metabolic state of ketosis that is kind of characterizing like what you're shooting for with the keto diet. But, the keto diet is kind of like the closest measure we have for, like behaviorally what could get you into ketosis. So. Yeah. It's pretty interesting though, because, a lot of people are looking at keto for a ton of different other chronic diseases, like not just type 2 diabetes, but, even like cardiovascular disease or Alzheimer's and, like it's that similar line of thinking with Alzheimer's, how it's nicknamed type 3 diabetes. And, it's due to that same like insulin sensitivity or the insulin resistance kind of thing, or that kind of issue. But yeah, like that insulin resistance and inflammation are pretty key things that a lot of people are looking into, especially like for the keto diet to be able to help. And, there's a lot of interesting things that you could like go deeper into, very kind of detailed, but, looking at ketones and stuff. And this works with a similar like line of thinking that our food is like signaling. Our food in nutrients are kind of like messengers. They tell and signal our cells and our body to do different things or to express, our genetics or epigenetics differently. And so ketones are one of the things that, people are looking at and seeing that, maybe they have kind of like a anti-inflammatory effect, like turning on different signals and also just in the metabolism, just the basic breakdown of ketones versus glucose is kind of like cleaner in terms of like free radical production and oxidation and inflammation ultimately.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely dive into ketogenic diet in a future episode. And you're right. People use it to address a neurological disease. In fact, it's initially developed as a way to address seizures. Right? So that's good. We'll definitely dive into that, and a kind of maybe even a stricter version of in some people's view of a ketogenic diet. It's a carnivore diet. A carnivore diet, for some people, it's like a natural extension of the ketogenic diet. In fact, many people who's been on ketogenic diet, even like myself, often end up moving to carnivore diet for at least a brief time. So maybe you can tell us more about that as well.
Yeah, so the carnivore diet is kind of just what it sounds like. It's just meat, like just meat or animal products. Like some people don't even do like butter or eggs on a carnivore diet, but yeah, you could do like butter, eggs, or maybe dairy. But yeah, it's just the basis of it is meat. And some people will do, there's always just different variations, but some people will do just like red meats, like beef or lamb. Some people will add like poultry or fish. But yeah, like the purpose for it really, really varies. Some people just try it out for fun, but there are quite a few people who do it for health issues, like a lot of gut issues. A lot of people do it for like IBS or like Crohn's, autoimmune diseases. And a lot of people like find a lot of success in it. And it's a lot of people use it for kind of like as an elimination diet, as like an ultimate elimination diet, because you're getting rid of everything other than just meat. And some people like can't even tolerate like fish on the carnivore diet, so they'll just be doing like other meats or like beef. And so, yeah, but like people oftentimes find that, they can, after doing the diet for a while, they can actually start to add foods back and not get bad reactions like gut, like distress or like bloating or like pain, or like skin issues or rashes or flares. So a lot of people like actually find a lot of relief in doing the like carnivore diet. So
Yeah, the reason I got into it for quite a while, I was on pretty strict carnivore diet for many months, and then I kind of switched back and forth between the carnivore-ish diet, where I have a little bit more, mainly just fruit, not even vegetables. And kind of switching back and forth. And the reason why is because of kidney stones, because of the high oxalate containing foods that I was eating a lot of when I was on ketogenic diet, mainly like things like spinach, almonds, making smoothies with spinach and almond. So I was eating tons of oxalate. My body is not able to efficiently clear out oxalate, so they end up building up, and I think I definitely felt it in my joints, and you can, but the big impact was the kidney stones. So instead of having surgery, so I elected to change my diet, and so that was able to address pretty severe kidney stone problems, where the doctors said that it's probably will require surgery. In fact, he was recommending it, but I chose to eat my way out of it.
yeah, it's pretty cool. And yeah, I also did the carnivore diet for a little bit, not very long, like maybe a few months. And actually, I don't even think I wasn't even full carnivore. I couldn't do it. It was too hard. I still did. I think I still did just like some nuts and then maybe some fruit. And I did it because I've had like gut issues for a really long time. I've had like pretty severe, because you could call it leaky gut. And that's when your gut lining or the cells lining your gut are basically not, they're like too loose, you can think of it. So normally it's supposed to be tight, so like the food and larger particles don't get through, because they're not broken down, they're not digested. You can think of them as like foreign particles. But with leaky gut, your cell like intestinal lining is not tight. It's like too loose, so things can get through, causes a lot of inflammation because they're too big, they're not supposed to be there. And I had a lot of like digestive stress, and like it's just a lot of pain, cramping, bloating, and it's not fun. And I tried a lot of different diets and elimination diets and different things for my gut, and try to address it from like a microbiome standpoint as well, like probiotics and different things. But yeah, ultimately it took me like a few years to finally try the carnivore diet, and I did it for like maybe about 3 months. And after that, yeah, I found that my digestion really improved. That was the one thing that really helped my stomach and digestion. And those changes have lasted even after I've stopped. And so honestly, for me, that was really, really, really shocking. Because even though, like I've done paleo, I've done keto before. It still kind of scared me to go like on carnivore because it's completely counter to the standard typical like dietary guidelines and recommendations. But it really helped my stomach and digestion.
Yeah, and then so we kind of still cycle back and forth, and just depending on what our health goals or even sports performance, we can utilize that different dietary approaches, and I think that's probably the one thing that maybe we can emphasize, that there isn't. It's not like there's one diet approach that is good for all occasions and for all people, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like I think in the conversation surrounding nutrition and diets, a lot of people like to think that there's one perfect diet, or a lot of people look into the blue zones and stuff to try to find the perfect diet, whether it's like Mediterranean or like Okinawan. Like people are trying to find this one perfect diet that's supposed to be best for overall health, longevity, or weight loss, all of these things. But I think that it's kind of important to kind of look at diets as like they can change between people, like change for different people and for the same person, like in different periods of their life. Like carnivore was really, really helpful for me, but I also don't want to stay carnivore forever because it's really restrictive, and yeah, it's kind of hard to stick to, and yeah, I don't know what would be the long term like health effects of that. But yeah, like it definitely helped me for a period of time. But yeah, I guess that's just the thing. It's like the purpose or the reason why you're doing a certain diet really matters. Because there are so many reasons, so many more reasons other than weight loss.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good overview. A lot of the common ones. Of course, there are a lot of nuances to each one of them, and maybe even some pros and cons that is not not common knowledge, I would even say, including some of the environmental impacts and ethical ramifications. So I think in future episodes, we'll try to dive into each one of these and see if we can explore them a little bit more thoroughly, a bit deeper, and even including things like intermittent fasting and the impact or the benefits of food restriction for, I think, health as well as maybe spiritual, emotional, mental benefits. Yeah, so I guess that's it for this episode, and I think hopefully this quick overview, it's a good place for you to get started. Maybe find some of these things interesting, and you can also dive into them a bit deeper and see if that's something that is helpful to your whatever your health challenges may be.
Yeah. So definitely, if you want to learn more about any of these diets, I definitely encourage you to just research it on your own, and keep an open mind, and like you can go based off of what works. Because I mean, even just for us, like it doesn't seem like a lot of the like traditional like recommendations, advice may not help for everyone. And so that was at least my own experience. And so definitely encourage you to just, if you're really in a tough spot and you've tried a lot of different things, just keep going, keep experimenting, and yeah, just keep learning for yourself. Yeah. But thanks for watching.